Hello friends, and welcome back to Swift Lessons for a follow-up on how to write your own original songs. Now, every great songwriter out there has their own unique process to write in original music, and it's cultivated over the course of many years of writing. So today, I'm going to be sharing with you a super effective, very popular process for writing original songs that you can use to analyze your favorite tunes, break them down into their raw components, use them as a template to create your own original work. Now we have three very simple goals for this lesson. First, we want to be able to establish what key a specific song is in. Second, we want to be able to recognize any common or stock chord progressions. And then lastly, we want to know if any special variations are being made to common techniques that might be unique to that specific artist. Now, let's get started. Okay, getting started with section 1 of this lesson. How do you establish what key a specific song is in? So we're going to be using Roy Orbison's Crying as our example. We've got the chord sheet right up here, and I'm going to give you 4 tips to being able to figure out what key this song is in. Okay, getting started with tip number 1. Look at the opening chord. So in the majority of pop and blues and rock songs, the first chord is usually the 1 or the root chord that matches the key. So, taking a look at the first chord of Roy Orbison's Crying, I can start to assume that this tune is in the key of D major, because it begins with that D major chord. Okay, moving on to tip number 2. Look for the resolving chord. So the resolving chord is going to be that one chord in the progression that puts everything to rest. Okay, if I play through Crying, that first verse, I was alright. For a while, I could smile for a while. And then I saw you last night. You held my hand so tight as you stopped to say hello. Yes, you wished me well. All right, I feel resolved there. You couldn't tell, definitely not the A7 here, that I'd been crying. Okay, so you see how that D major really feels at peace, very much resolved, very much at rest. So if I'm looking at tip number 2, finding that resolving chord, I can really assume now that we're definitely in the key of D major, which we are. Okay, tip number 3, know your keys. So you want to compare the available chords in the progression with your list of major keys. And if you have these things memorized, it comes about a lot faster. So basically you want to look at your major keys and see which of those keys contains the majority of the chords you're using in the progression. Now, I've already told you that I'm assuming that we're in the key of D major because the song started with D major, it ends with D major, and the resolving chords seem to be D major. Now, if I also know the names of the notes in the key of D, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and back to D, I'll begin to realize, looking at this chord sheet here, that the majority of the chords in my progression are in fact in the key of D major. That's a huge help. Okay, on to my 4th and final tip for being able to figure out what key a given song is in. Look for the 5 chord. And not just that, but train your ear to be able to recognize the sound of a 5 chord. Okay, so the 5 is used to create this feeling of a crescendo, which must be resolved by the 1 chord. So in Crying, we get this feeling once we hit the A7 chord, which forces the progression back to D major, thus revealing that we're in the key of D. That's the main function of the 5 chord. Create this big crescendo and force the listener to expect a resolution. Okay, so let's check out that segment of the verse, and I want you to listen for how that A7, the 5 chord in this key, creates that feeling of a crescendo and then forces you to expect a resolution back to the 1 chord. It's going to sound like this. Oh, you wished me well, you couldn't tell that I'd been crying. All right, and you feel that resolution, you felt the build up on the A7 chord, that 5 chord creating the crescendo, and then dropping you off back home to the resolution on the 1. Okay, let's review everything we just learned about establishing the key of a given piece of music. Taking a closer look at our chord sheet here, tip number 1 was to look at the opening chord. You see that I've circled that first chord. That's likely going to be the key, but not necessarily so. We still need to check out a few other things. Tip number 2 was to look at the resolving chord, play through the progression, and see which chord gives you that feeling of rest. And we were able to conclude that the D major really felt like it was the chord that was most at rest. All right, then we talked about tip number 3, know your keys. Compare the available chords in this verse or in the progression with your major keys, and you'll find that the key of D contained the majority of those notes. And then finally we had tip number 4, to look for the 5 chord, be able to identify the crescendo that forces you back to the 1. We were able to decide that that was the A7 chord. We are in the key of D major. There's no question about it. Okay, now moving on to section 2 of this lesson, identifying the progressions being used and also the unique variations that Roy Orbison is employing here. So in this section, we're going to compare the chords in Crying with those available in the key of D major and see if there's a chord progression at work. Now, the majority of popular songs utilize these things that we call stock chord progressions, which are then embellished by that artist's signature variations. So if I look at all the chords that I have in the key of D major, I have D, E minor, F sharp minor, call that the 3 chord, G major, my 4 chord, A major, my 5 chord, B minor, my 6 chord, and C sharp, half diminished, my 7 chord. Now if I look at those available chords in the key of D major, I'll realize that the only chords I'm actually using for the verse segment anyway is D, the 1 chord, G, the 4 chord, and also A, the 5 chord. And there are some obvious variations to this very common recipe that Roy Orbison is utilizing. So then our stock chord progression at use is a 1, 4, 5 progression, the same progression that's used in thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of great songs. But Roy is taking it to the next level by employing some very, very interesting techniques. The first of which is he's taking that 1 chord D major, drawing it out so the listener becomes very, very comfortable. And then he employs this amazing change, the D augmented chord, or the augmented 1 chord, which creates so much tension, it makes the listener want to move away from the 1 chord. Really, this is one of the only ways to do it. Okay, so then that gets us to the 4 chord G major. So playing up to there we had, I was alright for a while, I could smile for a while, and then I saw you last night, you held my hand so tight, as you stopped to say, and here comes Roy Orbison's next trick, and this is one that he utilizes in so many different songs. He takes the 4 chord, goes from the major version to the minor variety, and that is something that was very common in the 1950s and 60s. Think about the Beach Boys, think about all those great doo-wop acts. That chord change, that minor 4, is a really powerful change, and it's absolutely filled with emotional consequence. All right, let's play up to there now. So, the genius of Roy Orbison is unfolding. I was alright for a while, I could smile for a while. He's got you comfortable here. But I saw you last night, you held my hand so tight, as you stopped to say hello. Oh, you wish me, he resolves again, that you couldn't tell, crescendo, building you up. I'd be crying over you. All right, so that A7 crescendo chord built it up and forced you back to the 1 chord, and it also created the opportunity for a change. It brought you into the chorus section, okay, for that 1 to minor 3 change, which is also full of tons of emotion. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this. As you can see, all of these individual chord changes have their own specific purpose within the greater composition. Now that we've boiled everything down into their basic components, we can start to build things back up and create our own original song. Could sound something like this. I'll employ some tricks of my own. Maybe I'm ready for the crescendo. Okay, so as you can see, I was able to take everything I learned from Roy Orbison's Crying and create my own original chord progression with that D major to the D augmented change kind of at the focal point. Okay, so that's a very common process. Singer-songwriters very often will break songs down just like we did here today, and just to figure out which chords go together, figure out some new tricks that you can employ into your own original work, and then once you have everything kind of figured out, come up with your own progression, maybe change the key, change the rhythm up a little bit, and then start working on your melody, which will be our next lesson. Alright friends, thanks so much for checking out these songwriting tips. I hope you enjoyed them. Remember, if you have any original music you want to share with me, you can tag me on Twitter at Swift Lessons or on Facebook and Instagram. I'm more than happy to take a listen. Thanks so much to my patrons for making all these lessons possible. Hope you're enjoying your extra resources. I've got many more videos coming up, so keep checking back. Please subscribe, please share. This is Rob at Swift Guitar Lessons in Philadelphia, saying happy picking.